Good morning, everyone. I'm Betsy Cameron, and I serve as the president of the Ebby Halliday Companies. Let's wake up to expert insights with Soul Before Sunrise, my podcast dedicated to residential real estate. This series is going to bring you candid conversations, advice, and insider tips. Whether you're a real estate enthusiast or a professional in the field, start your day informed and inspired. Well, I'm excited to welcome our guest today, Chris Kelly, who has recently been named CEO of HomeServices of America. Welcome and congratulations on your new role.
Thank you, Betsy. Excited to be on your podcast. This is excellent.
Well, we could not be more excited to have you at the helm. Obviously, you led us previously and have experienced your really powerful, impactful leadership and are excited to have you at the helm at HomeServices, leading the way.
It's been great just in the first month and having the opportunity of been here for 5 years with the Ebby Halliday Companies and lessons learned and surrounding myself with really great people and taking those lessons as we move into the home services role as well. So it's been great.
Good. Well, question for you.
Yes.
How did you end your evening last night and how did you begin your morning this morning?
So in town for a real estate conference, and I was subject to some flight delays. And so I didn't make it to the hotel until midnight of last night. Nice. And they were out of rooms at the hotel. But I did, it's the new PGA Frisco, Omni, and they had a 4-bedroom ranch house that was available instead of a hotel room. And so I ended my night walking into a 4-bedroom ranch house and basically deciding which of the 4 bedrooms I should select to sleep in that night by myself. So,
wow.
Yeah.
Which one?
I picked the one on the west side that faced the golf course. So
nice pick.
There you go.
I like that.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
Well, good. Well, speaking of conferences, I did want to highlight one of my highlights from last week is that you brought together all of the president's CEOs within HomeServices of America, as well as the business leaders, and had a really great networking session, collaborating, workshopping on vision and kind of what you wanted to see. You presented, strategy, direction, and I just wanted to see if you would mind sharing kind of what is your vision for HomeServices of America, all the operating companies. And I think we're over 40 operating companies with almost 40,000 agents or something crazy like that. So what is your vision?
I think home services historically has been a little bit of a quiet name in the background, and we are been historically driven by the local, great brands that we have in our marketplaces. And I don't think that should change at all. But I do believe that we are in an era of real estate where having a national voice matters. And so really what we want to make sure is that home services is positioning itself to complement and support what our local brands are doing in their market. So, what the Ebby Halliday Companies are doing here across North Texas, making sure home services complements what you are doing. Part of that means is bringing a national strategy around data, right? So much of what we talk about what's happening in real estate is how do you better serve the agent so the agent can better serve the consumer. And part of that is just understanding human behavior, the data that we get through a real estate transaction. And we do that kind of disparately across our enterprise right now. And there's an opportunity to start doing that more holistically together. So retaining the local culture that makes all of our brands and our companies and our people special, but making sure home services is no longer this kind of quiet voice in the background, but we're actually bringing something of value. We enhance the value proposition that you are providing to your agents and to their clients, and that's a big part of it. The other aspect is that just as we have done here with Ebby Halliday for decades at this point, the DNA of home services is a full service brokerage. And when consumers are surveyed, it is almost uniformly, that consumers want simplicity when it comes to a real estate transaction. There's a lot of moving parts, as everybody knows, to pulling off a successful real estate closing. Our full service business model brings that. It brings ease, it brings simplicity to it. Physically, we have done that excellently for decades, right? You walk into one of our offices and physically everything you need to do a real estate transaction is right there, but from the agent to their loan officer to a title to insurance representation. Digitally, that is where there's a really big opportunity moving forward for us to make sure that from the digital experience that an agent and a consumer engages is that same ease brought together, that all of these services can be brought and done as one. Because when they're done together, it does create a better experience for the consumer. And there's some interesting data outside of real estate that supports our model. And one of them is that if you take like a really highly rated surgeon at the Mayo Clinic, but you pull he or she out of their operating room that they typically operate in, surrounded by their normal nurses, their normal anesthesiologists, all their familiarity, and you just kind of plop them into another operating room somewhere else in the country, what you find is their skill set hasn't changed, but their statistical averages go back down to average. They lose the advantage that they had from being an expert. And part of it is their team around them has changed. The other stat that was really interesting to learn, or scary to learn, was that the NTSB has found that 71% of all incidences happen on airlines the first time the flight crew has flown together. And so again, it's about teamwork. Individually, they're not doing anything different, but they haven't operated as a team. We really believe that when we surround our agent with a consistent team of all those other moving parts in the real estate transaction, that it creates a better experience for the consumer. They feel the difference when that happens. And that's how HomeServices was founded. It's not something that we decided to do later. It was literally part of our original business plan in 1998. And so I think making sure we bring that further in to all of our local companies moving forward with what you're already doing here, but bringing more of that to the digital space is a major advantage for agents and consumers.
Right. Well, there's been lots of rapid growth, challenges, crises. You talked a lot about, now moving beyond the crisis, and how do you lead now that we are through the crisis? Well, we have some challenges that are still always going to exist, but how do you lead now?
I think, one of the reasons in that conference we brought in a speaker, right? And his name was Jim Davidson. Jim Davidson's an author, but he's also a mountaineer. And he happened to be on Everest at Camp 2, so about 20,000 feet up, when the earthquake struck Nepal, Kathmandu, right there on Everest as well, too, in 2015. And they were stranded up there. Yeah. And one of the things Jim talked about when we were all together as a team last week was the idea that you can use crisis to build resiliency. And I do think we've done that. And it also adds perspective, right? So we have gone through some pretty major things in the real estate industry over the last, 5 years, from COVID to the market was just explosive to where that was stressful. And then rates changed, and then the market came back down to reality very quickly. Then we went through NAR changes and litigation, all kinds of things. But some perspective was helpful, right? I mean, when you look at the challenges maybe he was dealing with on Everest, life or death, it does add some perspective to what we're doing here. They're stressful, but we all got to go home every day at the end of the day too, right? And so perspective matters, but taking lessons out of the crises that you went through and apply them moving forward and acknowledge them. I think the biggest mistake we make sometimes is we don't acknowledge what we went through. So last week really was about acknowledging what we all went through, what we experienced, what happens if you stay in that state of mind of crisis for too long, and then applying those lessons moving forward. So a lot of last week was just acknowledging what we went through and appreciating the effort everyone put in to get through it. And now we can close that chapter. And as we move forward, I think the big things are you have to have focus on what you want to get done. You have to have clarity so your team absolutely knows what is the focus, and then simplify things as much as you humanly can. When things are complex, which is the natural state of affairs, it's really hard for your team to know what they're supposed to be focused on, what they're supposed to be doing every day. So we really tried last week to talk about what we want to be focused on, bring clarity around that, and then really try to simplify our processes moving forward.
And I've been talking about that with our agents, the same thing about how do we make it easier for the agent to do business? How do we ensure that we're delivering an elevated experience for the client? And those are very similar to what we talked about when we were at the meeting at a higher level, but collectively with all the brokerages, all the operating companies working together to be able to move in that direction together collectively, which is so powerful. Lots of great minds in there.
Yeah, and that was really the thing too, is that what was fun about last week, and I think this applies to anything, right? So when it's a sales meeting at one of our, Ebby Halliday Companies offices, you have this amazing brain trust in the room. And one of the things we wanted to take advantage of last week was it shouldn't just be me on stage talking. We did a lot of group exercises, right? You get a lot of brilliant people in the room, like maybe you should listen to them. And so the more you can do that and you get honest feedback from people, it really does help drive, again, what you should be focused on moving forward. And everyone feels like they're part of the process as well, too. And when you can bring that along with a team, and a team feels like I had a voice, I was able to share my opinion, I had a voice in the outcome, I'm willing to get on board and be part of the solution moving forward. And it's a big part of it.
So your top three, you mentioned top priorities for home services, and that's focus, simplify, and just kind of drilling down just a little bit further on what does that actually look like?
Yeah. So for us, the two big things that we're really, focused on is that we want to improve the digital experience that our agents and consumers have across home services. Right now, we do things a little bit differently at each company, but they're not differentiators. I mean, I don't think that what makes the Ebby Halliday Companies culture special is necessarily a specific tool or technology, right? That's an enabler, but it's not the culture itself. What we find is when we do things really differently across our enterprise, it does make us harder to advance other causes. So, there's a lot of talk right now about AI and AI overlays and how does that make the world easier in the real estate space. It's difficult to do those things when we're doing it, in a variety of ways across 40 different brands. So when we talk about simplify, what we're talking about is how do we do things more similarly across our brands, not from a cultural standpoint, not from even a branding perspective, but those backroom things, the tools that we put in the hands of the agents, those are what we can simplify. If we do that, we can run much faster moving forward. And then the second big focus is, again, doubling down on the full service business model. It's what the consumer wants. I truly believe it makes the life of the agent easier when we surround them with a consistent, reliable, and professional team that does all the other parts for them. So we ask the agents to juggle all kinds of balls to get a transaction to the closing table. If we can take a few of those out of their hands and let a trusted team do those for them, they get to focus on the client even more deeply. And they're not having to make all those calls like to make sure, are they going to show up at the closing on time? Are the documents going to be ready? I know my team's working on that and I don't have to worry about it. Therefore, I can focus on these other things. Those are the really two big initiatives for home services.
And talking more specifically, mortgage, title, insurance.
Correct.
Yes.
Yes.
As partners that we have. Let's talk about the MLSs and where we are today in that landscape. I know that there's lots of different conversations to be had around that right now. But what is your take on where we are, where we're going?
Yeah, there's a lot of, I think, distractions happening in the industry right now over this topic of office exclusives and put a property into the MLS. And when I'm asked that question, I mean, we're a national company. And we do things differently in each market, just like here, right? I mean, how a property may be marketed in the Park Cities versus, in Parker County or Cedar Creek Lake or Prosper, it varies, right? And so what I don't believe in is a ABC 1, 2, 3 marketing plan for every seller and every property across the country. Doesn't make sense to me. I believe that our real estate professionals who are with us are the ones who are best positioned to sit down with a seller and determine what is the appropriate way to market and sell their property. In some instances, I think very small, but in some instances, an office exclusive or a more limitedly marketed property is appropriate for that particular property or that particular seller. For the vast majority of our properties, it is the widest exposure possible. And that would include putting the property into the MLS. What I think has been confused or conflated over the last several months as this debate has happened within the industry is the term MLS being synonymous with market. The market is the market. I can have a house on the market and not be in the MLS. The MLS is just one component of the market. Now, it may be a really significant part of the market, but it's just one component of it. And so what the concerns I have is when we have these rules in place about property needs to be entered into the MLS within a certain amount of time, if this doesn't happen, that doesn't happen. The Department of Justice is not worried about office exclusives or properties being in the MLS. What they can get concerned about is when an industry apparently is attempting to create an artificial moat around itself from competition. And so we've obviously dealt with a lot of antitrust issues over the last couple of years. And so for the MLS, we absolutely value our MLS partners, the technology they provide, the data aggregation that they provide. They make our life simpler. But there are other innovations and other competitors out there that are looking to get in that space. And what we want to make sure is that the clear cooperation and other rules aren't used to essentially stifle innovation or stifle competition. There could be a new process out there that we could use to also disseminate listings that we don't have today. And we got to make sure rules don't inhibit that. And I think it's really important. I think when we look at regulators, that's the part they're interested in. So from office exclusives to properties being on the MLS, again, I trust our agents to make those right decisions. I don't think I should be sitting at a national level and telling our agents and sellers exactly how they should market their properties. It is different for every single one of them.
And I like that. I like that we are not, on this side, we truly believe that there are different options.
If there was one way to market the properties and Home Services was going to come up with a national way of doing it, what is the point of having these brilliant entrepreneurial real estate professionals associated with us, right? You could put in a team of robots and just say, follow steps 1, 2, 3 and be done. But I believe in the real estate professional and the expertise that they have for the markets they serve and the neighborhoods they live in. And they bring that every time they sit down with the seller to discuss how to market that property. That's the value that an agent brings. If you don't do that, then again, that's how we get kind of washed away as a profession because, well, I don't need that. I can just go do it in this very simplistic way under this marketing system. And that's not what sellers want either. The reason that we have realized that sellers are really sticky to real estate professionals is because they understand the value proposition that they're bringing to it. And we shouldn't do anything that detracts from that.
Right. Okay, another hot topic of conversation is the New York Times article that came out. Can you expand a little bit about?
Yeah, they did similarly on a podcast, and then they turned into an article. And the discussion was the NAR changes that went into effect in August of last year. And, again, a big misnomer from the very beginning was that the NAR changes where buyer agency commissions were pulled out of the MLS and they're now negotiated, right? That was going to have a significant impact on the commissions or fees that consumers may or may not pay. And so when they look back on it, and there has been changes, right? There has been some fluctuation in realtor fees on a national scale, on a regional scale, and local scale as well. But they did this kind of article as if the realtor community must be doing things as workarounds. And they use that word workarounds and loopholes to get around these rule changes, which is just blatantly false. And what we find is the easiest answer for me is why a real estate commission or real estate fee may be a certain level is because the consumer sees value in it. There's nothing being hidden from them, especially now on the buyer side. That agreement is signed at the inception of the relationship. It's clearly articulated into the agreement what the fee is, how to be paid, who will pay it. And what we see is the consumer sees value in it. The seller sees value in potentially paying a cooperating commission as well. And so the article alluded to listing agents putting 3 cookies on a plate in the photo or on a showing, and the 3 cookies symbolized, how much the commission was going to be. And none of it made sense because all we have to do as a buyer's agent is pick up the phone and call the listing agent saying, hey, is your seller offering a cooperative commission? I'm getting ready to show your property. And they can say yes, and here's what it is. They can say no, they're not. Or they can say it depends on what the offer is. So there's no need for this cat and mouse, kind of wink, wink on your nose tricks and stuff. And so none of it made sense on the reality that I know you're seeing play out in the real world as well, too. Our agents want to be transparent, and they want to make sure that consumers have clarity around the fees that are involved in the services they provide.
Right. What do you think the real estate landscape looks like, our business looks like industry-wise in the next 12 to 18 months? What do you see opportunities, challenges?
I think it comes back to the word we used before, which is the resiliency factor, at an individual agent level. And again, it's really market driven on what's happening. But since the back half of 2022, when we saw the market kind of turn from this crazy market to kind of coming back to reality a little bit, is 2023, that'll be the year. 2024, that'll be the year. 2025, that'll be the year. What we've seen is broader economic volatility, with rate inflections that we've seen on mortgage rates. It is causing some people to still kind of keep a pause on a buying and selling decision. So we're seeing average numbers of existing home sales, which would typically be in the 5 million range, are closer to 4 to 4.2 million. That will likely continue for the next 6 to 9 months because there's nothing on the economic horizon right now that would suggest anything's really changing there. So my message for all of us in the industry is keep doing what you're doing. Instead of focusing on what's not there, focus on what is there. There are still going to be 4.2 million. That's just not even looking at new construction. 4.2 million people are still going to make an existing home transaction this year, right? Because real estate is not just a financial decision, right? I always use the line from Jurassic Park, life finds a way. And it's true because our housing decisions are made by, children, we become empty nesters, or our family is expanding. People are going to college. We have job relocations. We have desired relocations to be near family, whatever it is. It's not just a financial play. It is not just buying a stock. And certainly finances play a part of it. But again, every year, millions and millions of people move out of necessity. And so when we talk about the rate lock in effect, like, oh, no one's going to move because they got a rate refi at 3%. What we see right now is the greatest number of homeowners have a mortgage rate above 6% since 2016. Now, it's still a smaller percentage compared to what other rates may be out there that, folks have, but the rate lock doesn't end overnight. It just starts to fade as more and more people have to just kind of make the move. Less and less people are tied to those smaller rates that they had during, a really crazy economic time period that we went through with COVID when rates were so low. And so we'll likely see the same 6 to 9 months, from a rate perspective, that volatility there, home sale perspective, but there's still a lot of people that have to make a move for a variety of reasons. Those are the folks that you want to connect with.
Yeah. So with so much evolving in our industry, technology, consumer behavior, commissions, what do you believe will distinguish great companies from good ones?
I think the ones that our industry is often a hair on fire industry, right? Something new comes along, we all freak out and we go, this is the only way we're ever going to do it. Nothing's ever going to change. And I can think back to 2019 when iBuying first kind of came onto the scene and everyone thought, oh my gosh, like this is the only way everyone's going to buy or sell a house, right? And what we find is that, one market has about 3.5% market share. They started in, which was Phoenix. And, I'm not sure what their market share here is in the Dallas, North Texas market, but I bet it's under 2% because the vast majority of homeowners still want to work with a professional when they go to buy and sell a house. And it's not necessarily about the quickest sale. It's about what brings the most value to my home sale, right? There are some people that will always value expediency over maximum value, but it's a pretty small number. Most people have put a lot of heart and soul and sweat and tears into their home. They want to maximize the value of it and not say, oh, if I sold it 2 weeks faster, but I have to, take a haircut of 20%. That's not what they're looking for, the trade-off. And so my point would be is that don't always follow the latest trend out there. The things that have made real estate great will continue to make real estate great, which is the relationship between the consumer and the agent. And this myth that the younger the consumer, the more disconnected they are going to be from the real estate professional actually doesn't bear out in the stats. What we find is that if you stratus the consumers by age cohort, what you find is that folks that are aged 22 to 35 respond yes at the highest percent. 91% of them say they want to work with a real estate professional in their next transaction. So what we've done is we have overwhelmed this generation of potential homeowners or first-time homeowners with a lot of data, right? Mm-hmm. Get on Google and just start Googling, Highland Park real estate, and it's just a tsunami of information, and they need someone to hold their hand and make sense of it. And so the relationship part of it will always be the key. If we continue to lean into that and understand that's what the consumer wants, there is a bright, bright future for all of us.
Mm-hmm. And talking about, because we did cover a little bit of AI, that's an AI is so broad, yeah. Right? But where does it, where is the innovation opportunity with AI? And, we see it in, marketing collateral and copyright and things of that nature. And I know we talked a little bit about, utilizing it in a compliance capacity. Mm-hmm. Do you have any other thoughts surrounding?
Yeah, I think, again, perspective, right? We're at a point in AI where it's very similar if this was 25 years ago, where we would be saying, we're going all in on AOL, right? It's all AOL all day long. We can't even fathom what AI is going to be doing for us in 5 years or 10 years. And so to me, I do think we're the key for most of us in this profession where we have the biggest opportunity with it and in the initial phase, right? The now phase is in that unloading or easing of the non-revenue producing activities, right? Mm-hmm. So that you're right, the compliance checklist, it can go through the forms and identify where things may be missing or everything looks fine. And it allows us to focus on revenue producing activities. That if I'm an agent, those are the things that I would be focused on using AI for, is what are the things I can hand off that allows me to lean further into relationships, further into client outreach. the other things, where it's going to do this and it's going to do that, it'll likely come. But I notice it every day. If I'm texting with somebody, let's say named Sarah, spelled S-A-R-A, and I do voice to text and I say, hey, Sarah, it's me, Chris. What I'll notice is 9 times out of 10, Siri will still say S-A-R-A-H, right? And it's like, well, if they can't even put that together with my contacts, right? So there's a lot to go, and they're working on it, and it's fantastic. I have a ChatGPT window up on my laptop all the time. I use it every single day, but it's to take things off, my plate that would be more non-revenue producing activity, more editorial type things, administrative tasks that I can comfortably hand off to it. And trying to predict what it's going to do 10 years from now, it's pretty scary, but also I think completely unpredictable, and it's almost a waste of time.
Yeah. I mean, it's probably going to evolves every single day.
But, there was a time when they thought the internet was going to replace the real estate professional too, right?
Right.
That because I could look at listings on the internet, I would no longer need an agent. So, so the internet was a threat to the real estate industry. And what we found, it wasn't the case at all. More people are using real estate professionals today than even pre-internet. And so I don't have a fear of AI replacing anybody. And it's the old adage we've all heard, right? Like technology doesn't replace, an agent, right? It replaces the agent who doesn't know how to use technology. And I think the agents that are become adept and comfortable at using AI in certain settings will continue to thrive, not be replaced.
And that's what, I've talked about is that, it can't do the negotiation piece that it takes the agent to do, that negotiating a leaky roof or a HVAC system or those types of things. I mean,
and there's a human compelling part of it, right? Like, I mean, you were a practitioner in this too, so you know what it's like to sit down with a consumer who might have a multiple offer bid and they're nervous. Is my bid going to be accepted? That's not something that an AI can do for them, where I can look across and I can feel empathy for you and say, it's okay, here's what we're going to do, or tell me about this. And that's the human connection part of it, is really the magic of what a real estate really any profession does, right? Bedside manner of a doctor, the practitioner that an attorney would bring when they're really listening to a problem. Those are what we're looking for when we're asking someone to help us in a very significant or important decision in our lives, not just spitting out a correct answer.
Right. Okay. What is something that people might be surprised to learn about you?
About me?
Yeah.
Well, I always like coming back to this story since we're sitting together.
Yes.
Is that, when I first took my job at Ebby Halliday, lots of people reached out to say, congratulations, you were one of them. You were with another company at the time. And you asked, hey, I'd love to get together and meet you sometime. And I thought, oh, this girl's going to be looking for a job. And so we decided to agree to go meet for coffee. We sat down and we realized neither one of us drank coffee. So we had our iced tea, and you were literally just that nice of a person wanting to say hi and welcome me to the new area of the country I had not lived in before. And by the time that iced tea meeting was over, I was then begging you to come work for me and, trying to get you to take a job. And so I came in with very different expectations than what I left. And I love telling that story because how we met and how it all came together. And here we are sitting here.
Here we sit.
Pretty amazing.
Okay. Another question. If you could choose to sit down at dinner with a celebrity, who would it be?
Oh, a celebrity. I think my son would be very disappointed if I just didn't say Patrick Mahomes, So, yeah, huge Chiefs fan, huge football fan, and a Texas guy. So, I'm trying to give the right answer here. But, yeah, that would be pretty fun. I would do that, yeah.
So
just to make him happy,
Oh, sure, sure.
Yeah.
So, with that, Kansas City Chiefs or K-State?
So that's a little unfair of a question. And if it doesn't mean erasing history, I'll say K-State, because we've had a pretty good run with the Chiefs over the last 5 or 6 years.
Yeah.
K-State's been doing well too, but, I wouldn't mind see them, get into the playoffs, college football playoffs. And so I'll say K-State only because it's been an embarrassment of riches with the Chiefs over the last 5 years. Yeah.
Okay. If you could go back and give yourself some advice, what would it be?
How far back am I going?
Well, good question.
Yeah.
Let's see. 20 years?
20 years. Okay. So going back 20 years, I would tell myself, because that would be in my late 20s. And the late 20s is right when you start to realize you don't know everything. Mm-hmm. You go through your early 20s and you kind of think you do. And your late 20s is when you start going, I don't really know it all. And I think what I would tell myself back then is to say, just trust the process that you're going through. And one of the things you and I have talked about a lot, and we kind of say to each other sometimes and during phone calls, is that you really don't know if something's good or bad until time passes. And so I think as a 29-year-old, I absolutely did not appreciate that lesson. You know, when something happened, you immediately made a judgment. This is good, this is bad. And it's only with time that you can look back and realize something was good or bad. And I would tell my, late 20-something self at that point is give time after an event to determine before you know it's good or bad.
I love that.
I'm trying to remind myself of that every single day when we don't know if it's good or bad yet.
Right.
We have to wait.
I love that. If you could erase one movie from your memory to watch it fresh again, what would it be?
That is a fantastic question. I have so many, and it's so hard to narrow it down to a single genre.
Well, there might maybe two.
Yeah, no, you know what? I'll just say I remember watching Shawshank Redemption for the first time because I went into it with zero expectations, right? Like it did nothing in the theaters. There was no fanfare about it whatsoever.
That's right.
So maybe the first time it was on TNT now it's been on there a million times or whatever. And I remember watching like, how did I not know about this movie? And so, yeah, that would be one that I would like to experience again. I've been able to experience almost the same effect of watching Star Wars movies with my youngest son as he watched them for the first time. And that's been pretty cool. That's almost the equivalent of watching something for the first time, something you really loved as a kid. And then you see your own kid do that. That's been kind of neat. So those two would be my two.
Love it. I love it. Well, thank you. Thank you for being here with us today. Thank you for sharing. And we look forward to continuing to move forward and see great things happen ahead of us.
Absolutely. And it's wonderful seeing you in your role as well, too.
Thank you. Yep. Thank you. All right. Well, that's all I have for today. Thanks for listening. And until next time.